I did not do all the taping on this, but I am very proud of who did. So we have like the lymph drain one, which is called the friendly quadrupus. Then you're not doing that one right if you don't put a face on it. Doesn't have to be a smiley face, but some kind of a face is absolutely needed. First and foremost, we got our sheet here. Now, I'm gonna make many adaptations to how this is presented. For creating this image, I was sticking with just a 3-piece of tape per area to try, and to also maybe indicate a bit of the order, if you were gonna try to pick an order. There really isn't that wrong. There really isn't a true wrong way to do this, aside from elements up there at the top. So this is just a solid cheat sheet for a lot of it. However, with certain things like parts of the shoulder, around the knee, etc., even the ankle, I'm going to show today some adaptations that may use additional pieces of tape rather than one long piece. Anytime you see a super long one, like the shoulder one, for example, is the best example I have for you. Look how long this is. Going here, all the way swooping around, and all the way to the back, okay? Whenever you see somebody trying to create that, that's gonna be messy for you if you haven't used the tape a lot, and it's messy in general. There's a bigger chance of something going wrong. And when it's with one big long piece and it has to do a hard swoop, that's gonna really want to curl up. So here and at the knee, at this bend, so you're bending against the direction that the knee bends. So the knee also loves to roll up on those corners. Thus, anywhere where you see a big U shape, turn it into a hard V. And just do 2 pieces of tape, one more or less in one direction, another in another direction. You're getting some overlap, but it's just gonna be more effective all the way around. See one big long piece, see if you can figure out a way to turn it into 2. So here, and I show it'll be 1 down, stop, and another one, all the way around, stop. And that'll just, it makes it easier, and it definitely makes it actually more effective for a lot of reasons. So, there's that part just concerning this. The next, which we'll cover a little bit more, but to give you a succinct, and stability isn't perfect. It really should be like perception of stability. Talking about the somatosensory input. That's a lot of jargon to blah here. So let's just go down. Oh, let me try to edit myself. Your checklist for applying this is that the tape needs to be put on the tissue always with the tissue on length. You don't want to tape the tissue where you create a skin fold. So if you tape the elbow like this, then that's going to have a weird time, right? So you tape the tissue in length. You position it however you have to in order to get the tissue that you're taping, the skin that you're taping, as long and taut as possible. Also, this tape is not meant to restrict mobility. So if I'm taping the anterior side of the wrist, I need to take the wrist and put it in extension. If I'm taping the posterior side of the wrist, I need to put it into flexion.
Name and email address.
So there's one area where there's a, the knee I end up saying put it in partial flexion. For the whole stretch, we'll look at that one. But everywhere else, you're just gonna be bending stuff and trying to make the skin long, make the joint bend sort of long in a direction away from wherever you're putting the tape, and there you go. The anchors.
You did this today, never mind. You don't have to do it, Chris.
Excellent.
Oh yeah, I cobbled one together.
Sorry, I won't interrupt you.
You're good, no worries. Anchors. Anchors are the ends of the tape, and the anchors should have like a good sizable chunk to them. The bigger the piece of tape, maybe a little bit bigger the anchor, the smaller the piece of tape, like these tentacles, for example, it doesn't have to be huge. But the ends of the tape, from beginning to end, they should have 0 tension on them. If you put tension on the beginnings of the tape, that will try to roll up. So you want those anchors to be zero tension, so they're stable and hold really strong, and then tension is everywhere in between. That way it just stays on there. That's the only reasoning there. And then beyond that, I mean, you'll see in other individuals that teach this stuff, and I went through all 3 levels of the KT taping proper, the big organization that started it. I went through all 3 levels of their education and workshops. I haven't maintained that per se. You do not need any certification to do this stuff. You would need to go through all 3 levels of the KT tape thing to do like the branded version and to go through their organization to like sporting events or to teach in their workshops, kind of a deal. But I just wanted something on my resume that proved that yes, I've studied this in a formal sense as much as I possibly can. I'd already been involved with it a lot on my own time, and then with all the sports stuff, it went above and beyond. So you have to be adaptable, and there is no one way or truly correct way to do it. And then some people can get a little bit tribal about which tape you pick, right? And we'll run through some of the brands and options there, but you want to usually defer to having at least one chunk of you want one option of tape that is pretty just basic standard with not an ultra aggressive adhesive for the individuals you want to use this with that maybe do have more delicate skin. So that'd be like KT tape original or this TheraBand stuff or this Spartan tape. I think that might not be what it's called. I'll go on Amazon and literally show you all the brands and everything. And then our main mechanisms of effect are going to be about fluid movement, pain, fascia, connective tissue, scar tissue, and then stability, mobility. It's really going to be about perception of stability, mobility. Because again, this is not bracing. This is not athletic tape, anything like that. It was never meant to be that in its founding. The creator of this, Dr. Kenzo Kase, or Case, it's K-A-S-E, directly developed this as an option that wouldn't limit a person's mobility, and even his key explanations were about how it lifts the skin, creates additional space for all the sensory receptors within to either just limit if you have pain receptors that are maybe getting squashed, then it's going to distract those by giving them the perception of extra space. Also, if it's lifting that, it's lifting the superficial fascia, just like a real mild cupping effect, right? And that's going to help sustain and increase pliability, because as we move, you know, the skin, with every movement we do, some portion of your skin and superficial fascia and everything is shortening or lengthening. If the tape is there, it's going to exaggerate the effect, mostly superficially, right here on the skin and superficial fascia, which is what lymph drain is all about, right? So the fluid movement component of this is certainly one of probably the most validated and safest elements. You don't need to cross joint lines for it or anything like that. Like this one's showing just one piece for it, but if you had one thing to take away, aside from some of the fancy like crossing joint stuff, for when you have a bad bruise with somebody, if there's edema and swelling, then this ends up being probably your most valuable lymphatic drain tool. You know, you can't be there doing the drain for the person day in, day out, right? And cupping, even though it's lifting the skin a bit more, it's not going to be sitting there doing it all day. The benefit would be if I were to create a perfect lymphatic drain protocol. Somebody comes in, you know, your classic edema on the lower leg, I would do all the massage stuff, all the joint movement pumping stuff, all the thoracic, you know, priming, breathing stuff. I would do the light cupping. I would do everything like that, but then also put the tape on. And then their homework is just when you're sitting, every time they're walking, it's going to be there helping. But then even if they're just laying and sitting in the recliner, rolling their ankles around, that's going to have more of an effect of helping move that fluid because of this tape being there just accelerating, exaggerating that natural effect that the body would have. The principle here is that the head drinks the water, right? And where the mouth is, it drinks the water. So it's always going to be, the head is going to be proximal, the tentacles go distal. And you could do as many of these as you want. So this one's meant to go for, you know, port to the groin. But then with the lower leg, why wouldn't you do maybe 2 on either side? Or 1 on like half? You could do 4 of them. You could just create a crazy basket weave of the head should be close to the knee, but not past the knee. You know, you're trying to get it to the knee joint. So the nice thing with these is it's low tension. You're not crossing joint lines. You don't even have to worry quite as much about positioning the skin because you're only going to keep it about, you know, 25 or less. You know, even 50% or less of the tension. It's just, the only difficult part is cutting that tape, which that's what you'll learn. It's pre-cut it and you deal with the backing. It's making the tape not messy ends up being most of the learning. And until you just do that a lot and get coordinated with it, that'll be the next thing. But if I had somebody with a really swollen limb, then yeah, I could do several of them, have those tentacles basket weave down to the ankle and the foot. I could do the same thing up here. Or I could do just, you know, 2 or 3 or whatever. But you're not going to go wrong there. Same thing with the limbs here, upper limbs. You know, you got the axillary versus the inguinal. You know, you'd have the heads of the quadrupus here, tentacles going down, heads here, down. So starting at a joint, tentacles running proximal to the next joint. Starting here, running distal, proximal, distal, proximal, distal. And that's where your swelling is going to be. I guess you could do it for the face, but that would be quite the thing. You would have to have then you would flip it upside down. You would actually flip it. But the skin here is real delicate. I've never seen it, I've never done it, I'm not suggesting this. This is for comedic effect, okay? But if you were trying to work out this principle of thinking, how do you use tape for lymph drain? And you're in a medical setting and you get told, this is what we're doing today. You're like, okay. Then I would flip the quadrupus upside down and its head would be here and the tentacles would go up and wrap around the person's face. And it would drain everything to the clavicles, right? So that one is the no nonsense, pretty much for sure works. I'll even show you some pictures of bruises and everything. The lymph drain element of this is the one not to forget. And you just have to be good at, you know, cutting some tentacles and you're good to go. Everything else is potentially just a gamble. But if you have somebody with chronic edema, and even if it's related to like an acute injury, you know, no breaching of skin. I mean, it should be no nonsense, makes sense. Like you're not taping where there's any potential for infection, any open wound, stuff like that. But even in the initial phases post-surgery, once like the incision's fully closed, but we're still in that delicate place where everything's still healing up internally, this tape is plenty safe to tape around that. I would never get it too close to the site. But the idea of being able to use that tape, you know, we got wound here, I can have the tape, you know, make sure it's not really close in proximity, but it's still going to be help pulling the swelling from that region. And it's safe, the tension of the tape isn't a whole lot, and because it's the smaller strands, it's not as painful to take off. So, the quadrupus. Let me make sure that one's visible. Rolling, rolling, rolling. There. Okay, now, let me caffeinate a bit. Any questions before I get rolling into another spiel?
I know, like, you can get, like, pre-cuts of certain, like, for certain joints and stuff. Do they make pre-cuts of that style, too, with the...
You know what? Let's look that up, because I do not know that one. There are lots of pre-cut, like spider tape is the big one that creates, like, the pre-cuts. For your average size people, those pre-cuts can work okay. I've adapted and used, like, the spider cut ones for other areas of the body. But let me ask the intra-Google if there is so let's say AT tape pre-cut lymphatic. It looks like, yeah, is that right? K active. Looks like we have one. So let me bring that up on the screen for you so you're seeing what I'm. Oddly enough, I have never researched that.
Because you're right, it is messy. So if I can take any of the mess out of it by having a pre-cut one, that's
it looks like, yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Now I have not used said brand, but there you go. It's nice and pretty, rounded edges down and everything. So, and then worst case scenario, let's say like you would have preferred it to be longer. It's not like you couldn't do one, two, to cover. Like you can stack them and have them like pulling to each other and everything. Not necessarily stacking, overlapping, but it's not like if the strands are coming to the elbow and then the head is more like mid-arm, you could have another one up here. It's just gonna keep the silk. I mean, it's just tugging on, it's just lifting and tugging the skin a little bit. The reasoning behind when these are spread out like this is that if you plant your own fingers on your skin and you start just trying to move your skin back and forth, the skin between your fingers is moving too, right? So if the tape is splayed out and covering as much area as possible, then it's affecting all that in between as well. So, yeah, very good question. So there's some pre-cuts there, and then there's pre-cut options for lots of stuff. I hadn't brought up the spider tape. There's a lot. I'm sure they have one for pregnancy. Let's see what we got here. These have all kinds of like full-on shapes. So like this one has a knee designed one, right? I'm a little bit, you're not usually going to have too much of a problem here. I'm cautious when I even show you the knee thing of you taping. This stuff's nice and stretchy and it'll probably almost always be fine. I'm just cautious with you taping on the patella and inadvertently taping too close to the patella. Mm-hmm. All right. Somebody's already hypermobile or elastic or something, then like that's the one that I get weird about. But there's pre-cut shoulder ones. This one's hard to see, but see how it kind of does this loop around, everything like that. Like, kind of cool. I have used this. We used to have a ton of them. I'm more prone to just making my own. And it's not 100% fair to say, but most of my people were giants. You know, they weren't the size that fit for most of these pre-cuts. But they have ones that are, have like the two ends and all that. Like this one, for example, is the one that we had a lot of, because I could adapt this for tons of stuff. So it's a giant quadrupus, and it's meant for the low back, but just because the tentacles are huge, it's still going to be doing lymph drain if I put it at any of the tension, it's tugging on the skin. All tape is doing the superficial fascial lymphatic drain stuff. It's all doing something to the connective tissue, and if it's doing something to the superficial fascia, i.e. connective tissue, then it's doing something to lymph. And if the orientation and direction, in this case, you're pulling the stuff down towards more like the, it's not going in interior, but I could totally slap that around the lateral thigh and have those big strands coming down and do stuff too, right? So, yeah, there's always going to be a premium for buying the pre-cuts, including the pre-cut pieces that are just like one solid chunk at a time. The reasoning for the rounded elements here is that the sharper corners will have a tendency to catch and roll up more often. So the procedure that is shown, if you don't have a pre-cut piece like this, is to take the sections of tape. Do I even have any uncut ones anymore? Well, the physio tape is. I think I have, because I wanted to make my life easier here. All these, but this is another one, and This is called physiotape. It comes in these metal canisters. In terms of price, what you're usually looking at is for like the standard-ish stuff, 15 bucks or less. For premium, 17 or more. It's not a huge margin, but if you start using it a lot, then it may start making an effect on your pocketbook.
You can, I've noticed a lot too, like shopping at like Marshall's, TJ Maxx, a lot of that like KT tape brand, you can get some there and it's usually like $6.99 for a
Oh, that's a good price.
yeah.
And when I bring up the Zahn, because like KT tape itself, so KT, the letters, KT, I'll start labeling our first ones you'll be able to find as good. So so brands. These suggested brands. KT. Tape. They are the OG, they are the founder. He passed, sadly, but he was doing this a long time. It was founded in, I think he developed it in the late 70s, early 80s, something like that. I think it was more the 80s. They have, everything is solid, all right? They're made of quality materials, hypoallergenic as you're gonna get, all that kind of stuff. They're the most readily accessible retail, like just about anywhere. There's no more Rite Aid, but Walgreens and all your grocery stores, usually, you can find this. And you can typically find the original cotton and the Pro. So it's just usually the most convenient. What we're gonna be practicing with is this TheraBand one that has these little hexagons that create a visual for you that when you make one of these hexes symmetrical, then you're at 25% tension if you make this, if that's the smaller one. If you make the bigger one symmetrical, you're at 50% tension. So it's a good visual for in a teaching situation. But in the practical real world, you just start approximating this based off, you stretch it to full, you go, all right, that's 100%, that's about 50, and you go, when I did all the workshops on this, they would get real precise. It'd be like 35% tension here, and I'm gonna get a little extreme here, but like 12% tension and 47.5 over here. I'm like, nobody makes this.
How do you measure that?
Yes. Well, there you're holding it up and you're looking at the waves. So KT tape has like a wave pattern, and it is probably associated also. It has a better hold, but like you hold it up. You look at the wave pattern, and how big is the wave, like how long is the wave, and then how short is the wave, and you're just guessing. But you can, there's a lot of bit, a middle bit, and a little bit. And that's how I work. That's why I'm like, all right, let's think 25, 50-ish, 25-ish percent, 50-ish percent, 75-ish percent, which basically, yeah, it's a lot, a middle amount, and a little bit. But yeah, this visual is better. This TheraBand brand, which is comparable, does a good job comparable to like KT Tape Original. And this one, you get cool reptilian skin. You can get all kinds of colors. So I was able to find this on Amazon at this was a good price for this type. It was 11 bucks per roll. You said Marshall's, that'd be a much better price.
Oh yeah.
But the small hexagon, you pull that, make that perfectly symmetrical, 25%. Big hexagon, make that symmetrical, get 50%. So it's a teaching tool, really great. It's not necessarily the one I'd tell you to get, but it's a good one. So if you like the look of it, and that can be part of it too. They have pink, they have all the colors, it's all the same like reptilian skin, but there is a cool factor of how this looks, right? The KT tape is not. It's more of these just standard, beige, black. It has all the colors and everything. So let's look at just what's this athletic?
They even have scented now.
Do they?
Yeah,
I saw
they
there's
have
a
lavender
menthol
one.
infused one. I didn't know there was scented
Yeah.
ones. But look, here you can pick all your colors. usually the sporty, the sport, the more advanced stuff, including this physio tape, or dynamic tape, sorry. I don't know why I say physio. It's been embedded in my head for some weird reason. Dynamic tape. They'll range in more that 17 plus. The one I'm real cautious about recommending to anyone first getting into this is rock tape. Okay, rock tape is the gorilla, the ultra extreme gorilla T-Rex tape of this, okay? And it's so hardy that you would be bridging into territory that maybe isn't gonna be as much about the fluid movement dynamics, and it's like gonna be, it's a really aggressive adhesive, so it can be ruthless on the skin. Now, but don't get me wrong, it's no joke. Like it's the monster one, and it has crazy patterns and all that kind of stuff. I think it has like a cow pie pattern.
Putting duct tape on your.
Yeah, and I mean,
ridiculous.
and if you wanted to go into this territory of like trying to force stability in an area, maybe, but I would tell you, I would say wear a brace, or go learn how to do some athletic taping. So.
Yeah, because it won't stick if you have hairy legs.
That's the other one
My
right
son,
there.
it would, that rock
Yeah.
stuff would not stick to
No,
my son's
no,
legs
no,
at all.
no. And you can get the milder stuff to stick. You know, it won't be great, depends on how hairy. Like, I'm not crazy. Yeah, I get to show off. Wow. I'm not crazy, but you can get the tape to stick to me. It's a journey to come off,
They
right?
even tried, like
But-
his physical therapist even tried
The
like
spray.
the spray.
Yeah.
And nothing.
No. If it's the thicker, more bristly type, and I don't know if that is for him. He's not even that too much, like thicker hair. Like
Yeah, he just, yeah.
yeah, because I'm finer haired and it does okay, but outright I was intrigued. The dynamic tape, all of these will come with a little like you can kind of what to do for yourself. This one, outright, number one, remove hair.
Okay, sir.
So remove hair. Now I'm not going to remove somebody's hair. I'm not going to like.
Shaming anybody.
So there is a truth that is, if you have somebody that's especially hairy and they want this tape done, then they're going to have to get the trimmers and do that first before this is going to be a factor, including if you're going to do. But they even have, all right, do that, clean the area, let it dry, adhesive spray. And it didn't come with the adhesive spray. Now, I watched the trainers and everybody do that predominantly, but the athletes were used to usually keeping their leg hair down because all the tape and everything, it was just, so that wasn't usually a factor for us. But I was pretty surprised because I hadn't bought a bunch of this just new in a box before to see, yeah, take the hair off and use the spray. And I went, that's surprising. And then, so they have like a whole procedure here. But I would say don't go there. If the KT has all these sporting brands, that usually just the standard sport one is pretty solid for if you need something a little bit above and beyond for like your athletes. You want it to hold, be pretty waterproof, but not like to the point that it's gonna fully cement itself to the skin and be a bad journey to take off. There's another version of this, which is like the Pro Extreme. So the Pro Extreme is more like an actual waterproof. But anytime you're going into a more aggressive adhesive, then you're gonna get into something that's, that doesn't even look different to me. Oh, there it is, Pro Extreme. There we go. So a couple bucks more. Seems to just ratchet up $2 every time you go up in durability. But that's the thing about the KT tape brand. All of it's there, it's all reliable. And you have a graduated like level of like hardiness and all of it. So you cannot go wrong with them. If you like the look of it, then the TheraBand is in the company that makes the bands, is the other brand. That's the one with the hexagons. There was a brand, and I don't know if it's called this anymore. Pardon. Yeah, there we go. Spark. Sparthose tape. Sparthose is your value quantity brand, okay? For those that weren't here, when I was testing out something we could get more in bulk for the spa, I would wear the stuff and go in the sauna. I had done this before in like the traditional saunas. It was an easy way for me to just see, is your adhesive made of nothing, and it just melted away. And there were several of the cheap brands that would. I'd take them in the sauna and they just would roll off like nothing. But Spartan held up pretty strong. It feels like it's pretty comparable to KT Sparthose. It's calling it so. Still came up as Spartan, but Sparthose. If anybody here is a Spartans fan. I have no allegiance to anyone. My college sadly closed.
Same.
Aging. It was done. Santa Heights. And then sadly, it went kaput. But Sparthose, you can get a big industrial roll, and if you're trying to do like how much tape for how much money, and you want something that's legit, there you go. You want something more hardy. There was the spider tape for some pre-cuts, solid brand there. If you want the hardier one, then it's this dynamic tape. The dynamic tape, I don't frankly notice a big difference. But it does have, I'm losing my stuff already. I had one out. I can tell that it's out. It's not in there.
It's right
It's
there.
right there. Okay. This one's got some crazy tribal tattoo-ish going on. This happens. Well, cool. I guess. I kind of think the TheraBand stuff looks cool too, but you know, we're going to get into the psychology of this too. There is something to be said for it having a design element that people can kind of, especially in sports, you know, that they can kind of get into the cool factor of how it looks, and the psychology of that is not necessarily bunk, okay? There's two factors that play into this from the mental landscape. And who cares if it's placebo? I do not define placebo and magic as anything different, right? Like, who cares? The miracle happened. And the elements, especially regarding pain perception, much of that they have a harder time quantifying. But pain is such a subjective, multifaceted, complex thing to try to study, because the nature of where the pain's coming from, the mechanisms of it, the person, their mental, physical uniqueness, their lifestyle uniqueness. Like if the person tends towards more stress or bad sleep quality, they're going to be more pain sensitive. Too many variables when we just say we're going to try to treat something for pain, right? Unless we're using a chemical like an opiate. Like there, yeah, we can fully dampen the perception we got something. But this, where you have a chance is like, now this, it's not like I've ever taped somebody's triple heater or solar plexus. I haven't done that. I just didn't have anywhere else on the body when I started making the picture. I was like, I had one big open area here. Maybe somebody has some kind of nerve thing right there. The idea here is just that wherever the center of the tape is, it's gonna retract and try to lift more at the center point. So if we have a pain receptor getting squashed, and I lift the skin and the superficial fascia and make more breathing space for said pain receptor, then maybe it gives it a moment. One area I can take from my personal experience, I felt this truly have an effect is when I was getting some ulnar nerve stuff. This is superficial enough that when I would get, because I never actually played much basketball, but when I was out there having to do all the court drills, everybody would annihilate my elbows. And so I started slapping tape on here, and it did feel like it suddenly like alleviated a lot of that, just because of that's just underneath the skin, right? So for a more specific nerve moment here, which is pretty unique, or for some areas, yes, it has a chance. However, it also could be a bit of the psychology of just like putting a Band-Aid on somebody's boo-boo. right? And it's okay that maybe is part of the reason why it helps people. And it can be, you know, we default to, I feel hurt, am I gonna die? And if there's something about, you know, speaking to the deeper part of your brain, right? The instinctual, deep-seated parts of our brain, and them having a perception of one, the area's been cared for, and then they can look down and be reminded, oh, it's been cared for, and if it looks cool, maybe that does another thing. So the mental component of that is great, and having maybe some colors available so people can pick their favorite colors, sure. But anyway, that's that one. What also this particular tape is built upon with one of its sales tactics is it has some stretch this way against the grain of the tape. So it can be tugged and stretched and pulled a little bit in all directions. It still mostly stretches in the like length direction of the overall tape itself. Like that's gonna be the main element of stretch, but you can tug this type and get a little bit more in a few other directions. And so that's a unique element to this one that I thought was novel, interesting, and worth everybody being able to just feel the difference of, because it has a different kind of texture and all that to it. The other ones feel more or less the same. Okay. All right. Any other questions considering brands, things like that?
How long would you expect each of those tapes to last in normal wear and tear?
A lot of times, it can last several days. I've seen people wear it for close to a week. Sometimes what a person has to be taught is that as the edges start to roll up, they can just grab that, trim it back down, stick it back down. It's probably more suggested like 3-ish days, maybe 3 or 4. But the thing to always, this brings up an important point, is if ever, and you just say this to your clients and for yourselves today, right? These companies don't want to be sued. They make this out of as hypoallergenic stuff as possible. However, especially when you have, that's where you want to be cleaning the areas pretty thoroughly. We have alcohol spray all over, and that'll be probably one of the better things to defer to. But you don't always know. There can be residual stuff, or somebody's skin is just uniquely sensitive that day, blah, blah, blah. If it ever starts getting red and itchy, to immediately take it off. That's your recommendation. When you ever put this on a person, it's the first time experiencing it. But in general, always moving forward, like for yourself and for your clients, if it starts to, if there's any redness, any itchiness, it should feel like it's getting truly irritated, but like it needs to come off. And then, anybody have a guess of the most friendly way to take said tape off?
In the shower.
Shower, and probably if you have an oil-based soap, like that Dr. Bronner's or something like that, like the undiluted Bronner's. I know I've read the whole thing, but it's wild. I have thought of that one since it's a pretty undiluted oil within the soap. But you could also just do oil. Put some jojoba oil or olive oil, whatever. Your massage lotion could be, it has oils in there. But an oil and then under running warm water or fully immersed in the tub is going to be the most gentle way to get this stuff off. Probably baby oil would be a good gentle option too. I haven't tried that a whole lot just because, again, a lot of times just go in the shower, slowly get it to go. But yeah, if there's no irritation, then a person is safe to basically leave it on as long as they want. And, basically a general suggestion would be in like that 3+ kind of a days. I would usually tell a person it's gonna start getting dirty. So probably about 5 days I would let it go. But I had clients where it was every single week, and sometimes she'd come in and it would still be on, And then I'd be the one to take it off, and that's fine. She learned to trim a lot of it. I had one particular person, that this shoulder thing was a big deal. She had really bad osteoarthritis here at the shoulder joint, monohumeral, and other people it was helpful, but for this particular person, it was like this really, really felt like it helped a ton. And so it was like 2 years of just every week putting that on. So, all right, there's our brains. And then there's a pretty picture for you. As the tape, so, the mechanisms of this tape, it's not rocket science, or maybe in some way it is, but you have an anchor. So there's your anchor. Anchor. Then we stretch the tape. We have another anchor. Then the tape is going to recoil to its center. That's how it's always going to function. That's going to just be the nature of how it is. And maybe you stretch the tape in one area and create more of an elastic-like effect in that direction versus another, all that. But the principle of this is no matter which anchor you start with and which direction you go, if let's say the stretch was uniform, it's going to retract and have most of its lift at the center point. And that's just physics. So anybody trying to say, like, when I learned this, there was this whole idea that drove me nuts, and I had to bite my tongue the whole time, that if you taped origin to insertion, it would potentially activate the muscle. And then if you taped insertion to origin, it would deactivate. And I just couldn't wrap my noggin around it because it doesn't make any sense. So there are systems out there that kind of try to work off the idea of, let's say, firing pattern sequences, for those that have seen those recently. In the quadriceps muscles, it's ideal that the vastus medialis is dominant, comparable to lateralis. So they were teaching this idea that you tape lateralis in a way to deactivate it, and you tape medialis in a way to activate it. And I was like, I get your intention here, but I think you're wasting mental energy. The direction of taping on those structures and everything is great. You're taping on muscles related to knee extension, knee function. There's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's an unnecessary mental exercise for you to think about taping in one particular direction to get the result. It's going to, you could change how much stretch you put in certain sections, especially for scar tissue. Maybe you do want to tug it in a particular direction towards bind to get that. Or with the amazing friendly quadrupus. Since that's a larger hunk, the smaller sections are going to retract towards the bigger section, right? So that's why you would have maybe an argument that these are pulling a little bit more upward that way, okay? But the rest of it, don't overthink it. And although it's a little bit blurry, this gives you enough of a visual. Now you leave the tape on long enough, it does start to do this cool kind of keloiding. Anybody that's done this a little bit, like you leave it on, and initially it's kind of flush. After a day or two, like it'll come and it'll have like the little ripples and wrinkles and stuff. So I mean, it's having an effect, and it has an effect over time. But as a visual for connective tissue based approaches, for fluid movement approaches, for pain reception, all of that as an analgesic, this is really the principle we're working off of, is that wherever the tape is, wherever the stretched part of the tape is, it's lifting the skin a little bit. And then that's going to have an effect. All right, so through all of that, our next piece here would be thinking about, it's not the right one. Why don't I ever just throw it away? Okay. That's the one. I'm putting these in a, finally, there we go. All right. now we can think about, as I mentioned that we have the element of like fascia, scar tissue. You don't necessarily have to be crossing joint lines or anything like that. It's you being mindful with your intention and taping the tissue towards bind. And we'll play with that principle a little bit, but if you can find it with your hands and it's like, okay, it doesn't want to go that way, tape, stretch, and just try to stick it with it nudging the tissue in that particular direction. Or if you need to think less, then for something like this, here's a scar. If I had a scar to work off of, then here's my actual scar. I tape one piece with the anchors, anchor all the way over top of it. Then I could tape a piece with the anchor on one side, going across. That way this is retracting and pulling it up uniformly. This one's going to pull it a little bit more that way. Then I could do another one this way, pulling it more that way, another one this way, pull it that way, and create a crazy weave stitch.
Now, when you say pulling it that way, is it just because the other one is on top of it, or?
Nope, you could not even have this one. You could just do these three. You could do a crazy X pattern.
So
The idea is that
eliminate the middle one.
if the pull's mostly here, then that means the skull's gonna get tugged that way. If the pull's mostly here, the scar's gonna get tugged that way.
So in order to get that pull there, you would hold down that section and then pull it?
Yeah, and that's what all the practice will be. It's like you snap down the anchor, you tug it over, slap. And so that may be a reason why I tape in a particular direction or order, that I would maybe not do this anchor first and go over. I would do this one, it wouldn't matter. Anchor to anchor, it's over top of the scar. Great, but the rest of them, anchor close to the tape, stretch it away from the scar, stretch it away from the scar, away from the scar. And then it's gonna pull the scar in a cool, ideally, wave formation while also lifting it upward a little bit. Or, I don't know, this is where I go like, I don't know, do an X pattern on it. That's where this principle is working off of too, is that the center point of multiple pieces of tape, trying to maybe do some cupping. Like we're gonna maybe have some extra lift when it's overlapped. And that's where I just really stress, don't listen too much to somebody trying to formalize the operation of this. Follow your intuition. And you can be pretty adaptable when you're talking about fluid movement and connective tissue stuff. Like, let your palpation skills and intuition guide you and try something out. Because you can always do a different version of that in the future. The places where it gets most complicated and where frankly we have the least amount of evidence is the stuff that crosses the joint lines. And it's supposed to be about stability and mobility. But it's the fancy stuff and it's the most difficult to apply, so it's the one that needs the most practice. But that's just because you have to make sure you're making this tissue long, and then you get a person over here and you make sure this section's long, and you gotta make sure it's a lot of moving parts to get that applied correctly so that the skin is all on tension and you're not limiting the shoulder's mobility. But the proprioceptors of the body are mostly around joint regions, tendons, ligaments, stuff like that. So maybe tugging on that and that whole thing, maybe yes, with the stuff I mentioned before. Is it getting a person to adjust their posture naturally? Is it adding somatosensory input here so as a person does movement, they're doing it in a more efficient way?
Mobility questions.
Yes.
So concerns around partial dislocations and dislocations in general when using tape.
If you were going with the really aggressive stuff, maybe. When you feel this, it's gentle enough where I would have no concern. And since when we're at least the way I showed you, The way I show you to tape, I don't have an elbow one here. The very first one we'll practice on each other is one you could apply for yourself for wrist stuff, all right? But I think it's silly. I'm looking more at the picture rather than pointing on the model. If you want to be super thrifty and only use one piece of tape on a person, I get you, but I think when I broke down, that's like 20 cents or something a piece or whatever. So if you're already charging for like a tape, do it for like a charge for a region, like 10 bucks or something like that. Or, I mean, I really spent most of my career not charging for it at all. Like I showed up and I did a lot of traveling to the athletes' homes and on the road and what have you, and it's just like, well, there the tape was being bought for me, so whatever. But I don't see it really as a big enough expense. And outside of some environments, like over there, yeah, everybody's got to make a buck, and it's a way to like get the therapist extra money, all of that. So there we do charge a little bit more. But if you're in private practice, and even over there, I'm not there enough to dictate any of this, but I was always like, I always went, let somebody at least try it the first time for free is my big suggestion. So they can actually make other stuff is more immediate, like essential oils and the CBD and all of that. Like that one makes sense to not necessarily not charge for. But this one, and think about it, with your clients, it's a way to address the area without overworking on it using manual therapy and massage. So I can work on the area and address it, but rather than if it's the first time interfacing with somebody and I had any concerns about overworking something, I could go, let's try doing the tape and see what that does for you. If the tape feels like it works great for you, we know it's something to try to include in the future. But in terms of this whole relationship of making a person feel cared for and their key area being addressed, all that, it's a way to have done that without mashing on the soft tissue more. And it's something that's there. Like the person, you put a nice pretty Band-Aid on their boo-boo, it has holding power, it'll be there for days. It's kind of a good reminder that somebody did something to help them, and it's you going a little bit the extra mile and showing some care and consideration. And so from a business side, you want client retention, give them a freebie, make it look pretty, and they'll probably appreciate it.
Before or after massage?
After. The best suggestion possible, and where we have a great advantage in the application of this and the potential effect of this, is that not only do we have easier access to the skin, and can we reposition the person on a table. I had to learn all those workshops with people coming in tank tops and basically people seated. I was the only massage therapist out of like 50 people. It was all physical therapists and chiropractors. Because they can bill for it. Mm-hmm. But then they're just having people sit in a chair and do it. I'm like, that's silly, especially for this one. I'm going to turn you on your side and do it that way. The draping, Now, that being said, I can't see it too well. These towel cavities, if you're going to include it in your practice, that's where it really works awesome, okay? The towel cavities, you have the hot, wet towels that then you can clean the area with, get the massage oil, get all this, because you want to defer to one, any oil limiting the ability for the tape to stick, and you don't want necessarily like other things being taped underneath. So we had somebody back in the day, not here, it was one of the athletes, use like Tiger Balm and then taped and yeah. But essential oils, all right? Essential oils, even the gentle ones, I don't suggest comboing things, at least not. I'm telling you to go work on the public, I'm like, just be extra careful. I've combined it on myself and I've been fine, but.
So I typically will do like the hot towel to take the oil off the area
Yes.
and then attach it. But you mentioned the alcohol spray. Should you also be using
Not
alcohol spray or
necessarily.
the hot towel?
No. A lot of times, people will do that, but I'm mindful of like it's drying the skin and can be kind of aggressive on the skin. I don't want to irritate their skin with the alcohol.
Yeah.
And then black tape on that. So if I can avoid the alcohol with the clean hot towel, but then you're gonna have to dry that.
In a pinch, hand sanitizer?
In a pinch, yep. As long as it doesn't have the extra goo in it,
Yeah. So
you
it's-
know. You want like a true just, yeah, in a pinch, I mean, all right, totally did. Sometimes I had to, you know. And so it was hand sanitizer and a sheet. You know, that was only in a pinch. But best practice I could ever tell you to have is with the hot towel cavities, because then the big one too is that when we're practicing today, they'll call it activating the tape. Kind of activate it. All that's doing is using friction to warm up the adhesive and make it liquefy. Thus, that way it disperses and then like adheres to the skin. So if you don't want it to stick on you too much today, don't activate it. don't rub it. It'll come off very easily if you don't rub it. But the goal with the friction, if you see anybody applying this and then they're doing this afterward, there's no other benefit of that than using friction to create heat. So the hot towel cavities, what do we have also? The dry hot towels. And then think about the effect on an area. I have a boo-boo. I massaged the boo-boo. And then I did a hot towel and made that feel like massage. Now we're doing some thermotherapy stuff. Now it's cooling through evaporation. That's gonna have the cooling effect post the heat. And then I apply the tape. That's gonna be a counter irritant, maybe some psychology stuff, maybe some actual fluid movement, inflammatory stuff. And then I do the hot towel on top of that. That's more thermo touch, and it's going to be the most effective way for you to get that adhesive. Like when including that, it was a game changer. When I have access to those or hot packs or something, makes that stick so much better than doing this. And that's kind of annoying. That's not my favorite sensation. I can make this feel kind of okay, but the hot towel on there is much more pleasant for the client to experience, and it's easier on me. So hot towel cavity plus this, big win. Makes everything and makes everybody happier. All right. And then let us just jump in. Okay, then let me make sure I write down for the lymph, then for fluid movement. Lip. And that's where just, you know, happy quadrupus. And you could make more tentacles if you wanted, and you can get thicker pieces of tape if you wanted. You can get real artistic with it. The idea being that the anchor has no tension. So this green segment should have no tension in each of these. Think of them like a quadrupus where they only have one suction cup at their ends. But that's really the only challenge with applying this, is that you're doing zero tension here, stretch the tentacle, zero tension at the ends of each tentacle. But you can do that anywhere, and since you're going to do it at minimal tension on the skin, you really don't have to worry as much about making sure the skin is long as you're not taping a wrinkle. Like you can have a person pretty much sit pretty comfortably, their poor edema foot, and just put a bunch of tentacles over it. It'll go a long way. The effects of that can be pretty profound. So let me go to Google Images. Yadi,
I'm out.
be free. I appreciate you very much.
Yes.
And let's look at a bruise. So, it's pretty wild. Like, there's a good example. This isn't somebody just creating this. I've seen this replicated plenty. So I mean, if it's doing that, it's moving gunk, right? So it's a pretty neat thing, especially when you have those occasions where there's a big nasty hematoma bruise. I'm sorry, I got this guy right in the way, don't I? We can start moving that out of the way. But yeah, and now you'll see a lot of people doing this basket weave thing. Sure, fine. It's nothing wrong with that. I would personally prefer to do, now if you're going directly over a bruise and you're just trying to move that blood out from underneath the skin, then sure. basket weave all you want. They don't necessarily have to, like I would do it more like this way. There's options they'll be shown to do the tape kind of like this, but to keep anchors on either side. And then you're folding it in half basically. Fold it in half and create like your snowflake. And then you have just a lattice in the middle. I've never really bothered with that. I just do bunches of these. And I've seen them interlaced like an actual basket weave. I mean, let your creative spirit shine. But whether or not making it prettier is more effective is up to. But I don't care. Whatever guides a person's intention and makes you and them believe in it more, then huzzah. I'm fully on board with psychology as long as it's not nefarious. So. All right. Now, what we shall do is each practice with, spread this one around. These are all pre-cuts. So I'm at least I'm gonna kind of hand everybody at least a roll to hang out with. Don't run away with it too much. Everybody's welcome to take a few pieces with them, but leave me with at least some tape. I have a pink roll hiding here. Here's another beige one for you too. And some extras in there. You get whatever that blob is. Then here's a green one for 3 here and a beige one for you. Forget this collection. All right. This collection can share. I'm confident you guys will share it with each other. All right. So I'm going to show you what I spent about, I think it was $3 or $4 grand to learn. Okay, so, all right, you ready? Okay, I'm going to try to visualize about how much of an anchor, and I'm going to pre-tear the tape without taking it off. Oh yeah, we've got to get her a piece. Oh, my bad. Should have told everybody. Hand a piece back. Okay, the other side, the other anchor. On these pre-cut pieces, then I think about an inch-ish, inch or two. An inch would be sufficient. But pre-cut, pre-tear the anchor. Now that's in your cheat sheet. It says tissue on length, pre-tear anchor. Pre-tear your anchor. All right? Now, there's a few ways we could apply this. Then the whole trick with applying this is just not to take the whole backing off in one go and slap it on, typically. Now, I could take the whole backing off, grab hold of both anchors and then go, and I use that for like this one here. Take the whole backing off, I stretch it, and then I go like a shoehorn, okay? But typically, and what the first one we'll do for each other, because you can apply it pretty easy on yourself, is we'll think our carpal tunnel moment, all right? We're gonna apply our anchor right there. Now, if we're strategic, I have a system where I start to grab that backing off, but I never just completely take it off. I have it still pinched and in control. And then I'm able to just get that first bit of tape stuck down without having to fully commit. All right, so I'm trying to go right on my palm because I want the stretchy part of the tape to go past my wrist. Now, what do I have to do to my wrist? Should my wrist be like this? I have to make the tissue long. So make the tissue long. If I can get it. It's not the most coordinated thing. But then once I get that first part of the tape stuck, see how the backing's still not off? Let's go. Whoop. Okay, now that's stuck on. And we can make little adjustments here. Now that can flop over. And if you can do this one-handed, this is part of my trick here, is if you can do it one-handed, you can do it with both hands.
You want the anchor as neutral as possible?
0, yep, as 0 and neutral as possible. No tension on that one at all. And then this section, now we can fight to get, that'll be the only challenge when doing this with one hand. Finding a lip, you come to me. There it goes. Okay, But we don't have to peel this whole thing off again. Just peel it halfway, fold it over on top of itself. Use the backing of the tape like a handle, okay? Now, we're gonna go to, we have our hexagons. So let's make our big hexagon, if we can find one, more or less uniform. Okay? And then just all at once, tissue long, hexagon uniform, stick it down. Smooth that portion of the tape. Don't like fully activate and rub, just get it stuck down. And then we have the next part where I can take the backing off bit by bit, stretch, apply, stick, take the rest of the backing off of that one, get that portion of the tape down, then that last one, the anchor, same thing, just slight peel, but that one's gonna go down with zero tension.
Yeah,
So,
how
I'm
much
near the-
tension was on?
I tried to just make the big hexagon here. I didn't get that one very good. See, let me pick it up. I want that big hexagon symmetrical as possible. Now, here's the thing. I got near the elbow. Technically, I should straighten the elbow. It won't matter too much if you didn't, but ideally, all the tissue as long as possible. It should be like this. And then anchor comes down. And then that's about 50% tension.
What happens if it goes to your elbow, that forearm?
You'll be all right. As long, we'll get those ones off. The inside of the elbow is more sensitive skin. The sensitive skin area, not too bad. I'm usually cautious putting too much tape there. I would have had yours come over to the side and anchor more on the side of the elbow.
So it doesn't really matter where the anchor is, it's not gonna affect here, it's still gonna do what we want it to do here.
Yep. If it's a bit too long, that's one of the arguments behind getting the big rolls and then just cutting your own, right? So, but if you do that, then it's a bit more just effort. You have to, I really don't have, that's right, the dynamic tape isn't. So like with this stuff, which I'll show how to just cut, and we'll play a little bit with that and like cutting these and making them the right size. Because then yes, I could adapt the size of each tape to the individual person and to the area in question. So pre-cuts, good, but are they sometimes a little too short or a little bit too long? Yep, that's gonna be the rub with
So
that.
how would you guess on that if you wanna stretch it, like, I mean,
You just, with practice, you'll get a good general sense of like, right.
what they say 50%, like, you do half of it?
Yeah, well, it won't stretch quite as, usually I hold the tape up, because let's go ahead and look at this. I stretched this one about 50. It's not as much of a difference as you think. So, once it's all, because we taped it like this, but it ends up probably only being a couple inches different. So, even on a pre-cut piece, I would maybe only like add that much more onto it. So we'll call it 3 or 4 inches. But yeah, that's the tough thing. Now you do less tension, gonna cover less area. You do more tension, you'll cover a little bit more area. So there you go. Does it feel like a miracle happened?
So on mine, the anchor is right at
Yeah,
my elbow. Could I
Yeah.
expect some rolling because of?
maybe, but you'd be
Yeah.
surprised. You know, this holds up pretty good. If it's not right at the crease, you know, that one I would reapply. For you, I wouldn't want to leave it like that. I would have that one arc over, and I would treat it like if I wanted to cover more space, and it would work out fine for this. This is where, if I'm going to present how to be more adaptable and not get lost in just following what the internet says or even what I say, it's going to be ideally you visualize the anatomy to the best you possibly can and follow some chunk of anatomy and try to make it make sense. Thus, if I had extra tape here and I'm going to donate my skin, sorry, and I wanted to make up the additional room. So we started there and I had enough tape to come past the elbow. If I give it 100% strength, rather than doing this, that's going to a delicate area of skin. You know, I usually don't want to take the the anterior portion of the elbow, the posterior portion of the knee, a little bit thinner skin and lots of creasing, so it's gonna probably roll up. Can anybody remember where the common flexor attachment is for all your forearm muscles? Your big finger muscles and your elbow flexors. Is it on the inside of your elbow or the outside of your elbow? Yeah, the common flexor tendon. So go ahead and make some, Popeye arms and stuff like that and feel. Chase your forearm muscles all the way down to the inside of your elbow. You'll feel right there. Usually got to kind of ulnar deviate a little bit too, okay? But the big muscles of your forearm that are related to wrist flexion, ulnar deviation, and finger flexion, they all unify right there. So that's golfer's elbow.
Your weekend warriors. That's what I've been getting a lot of.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
This all hurts. Well, what did you do? I pulled all the weeds. Okay, what
Yeah.
are you doing when you're pulling all the weeds?
Yes, yes.
So that's all this, and then all
Yes.
my typers come in,
Yes.
and that's all this on the outside.
Yes, common extensor tendon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a huge. They love that.
Yes. So working here thoroughly. So think from a massage standpoint. We're really thorough in freeing this all up. Now we put the tape on, and the tape is there, maybe hoping. My perception and my prayer always is that it's sustaining what adjustment I made for longer.
Mm-hmm.
Keeping the tissue pliable for longer. Limiting, especially if we're dealing here. If we're crossing here, I do not have to be thinking about the mobility, stability of the elbow. It can be counter irritation of a tendon related to tendonitis. So golfer's elbow, I gotta cross that. Tennis elbow, and it's the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's a weekend warrior, if it's a person just at computer work. It's the same tendon that's getting irritated.
But when you put a pretty little piece of tape on a 57-year-old woman, and
Yep.
she gets to go back to the office and type
Yep.
out with her, oh my.
Yep.
Yeah.
Love it.
Now what I may
Love
have to
it.
do with this is I may have to do a piece of tape that like covers the elbow and covers just the wrist. If we had a full-on carpal tunnel person, okay, and I wanted to do the best thing possible that I could think for them, and I might make a mess of this. And if anybody here has wrist issues, then we can work for that. But I could go one piece of tape here. I'm a little bit cautious. You could do a piece of tape where like there's an anchor here going around and an anchor here. I'd have to cut this one down. I just am cautious with creating any kind of tourniquets, okay? But it's not wrong. You could make a short piece of tape and just have it do a here. If I do that, I'd have to lengthen, stick, lengthen, stick, lengthen, stick, anchor, and then there's my anchor, and I would cut that. Okay? But don't ever anywhere. Don't create tourniquets. Okay? But I would be more prone if I was doing everything I could think of. Somebody comes in and they have wrist, elbow, blah. Okay, and I don't care about using a few extra pieces of tape. I just want to do something that I know is going to be helpful, or has the best chance of being helpful.
What about tendonitis?
That's going to be it. At least as long as the tendon is superficial enough. So here we go. For a carpal tunnel, which can be irritation of more of it's more where like all the tendons are passing under that retinaculum ligament. So here, I go across it, got a piece of tape there. Then I do another piece of tape over here, just to balance it out. Agonist and antagonist. So stick, here, good. So both sides of the wrist. If they had particular thumb things, it's not like I couldn't do ones on the sides, too. If I had a long piece of tape, then yeah, I could do this one all the way up. But this one would be, I'd have to have that at full 100% tension, and it probably would feel okay. And if I did it on both sides, that is an option. But at the very least, I'd have another one that starts down here and crosses. This is all going great. But I want the anchor, I want to be for sure the stretchy parts of the tape going over where the tendonitis is. Now at the elbow, you kind of are in a place where typically you're going to have an extension for just both of these. And like it'll do all right. But anywhere where there's a ton of movement, that's going to have a chance. So that's where you'd want to be real thorough with like the hot towel or the friction to get it to stick down. But why not do potentially for somebody, cut this in half, cut one of these in half, do both sides of the wrist, and then do a longer piece to cover the rest of the flexors up to their common attachment. And then same thing, half piece of tape. So one total piece for here and here, and then one piece here, one piece here. And I've covered all of it. And if I needed to, maybe I could even cut a piece of tape in half and go over the tendons of like the thumb or something like that.
Would you want to adapt the tightness so that since this is the compressed side, a little bit more compressed and a little bit light on the tension on the other
And
side?
there, where I tend to go with you is follow that intuition. You're best defaulting to uniformity. If we want the safest thing, it's like 50%, 50%. That's a safe place. When I'm crossing jointed areas, if the person's skin type is good and they're a pretty active person, then I've defaulted to a little bit more tension. The best example of that when I show you is I put a lot of tension here and here. Like I go max. I go pretty close to 100% on those areas. Just because through experience, I found that it gives a perception of helping a person keep their shoulders back more and stabilizes that AC joint. But if you want the 100%, you can't do it wrong. Do about 50% on all of them, other than the quadrupeds. And it's gonna be safe, and then you will just, beyond that, follow your intuition. Think about what you felt while doing the massage. And if you think an area needs a little bit more, give it a little bit more, kind of a deal. So yeah, if most of the symptoms were here, then I might give that a little extra oomph. But I think it's more practical and more easy on a therapist's mind to just consider the antagonist region too, and to always do that. So in your pretty pictures here, that's what most of this is set up for. I even showed the one for carpal tunnel. We have lots of listed bony landmarks and ligaments and stuff like that. But depending on if people have to leave earlier or anything, this gives you a pretty concrete way of processing this. For the wrist, yep, piece of tape on the posterior side, anterior side, little bracket across the carpal tunnel. Why not? If we're gonna do the elbow at all, then we might as well cross both the common extensor tendon and the common flexor tendon. They can do a U shape like this, or they could just be, I frankly would just have it follow. I'd have it go down and across. So these overlaps and U shapes, maybe aesthetically I thought at first were cool, but whatever. Knee, same thing. So the foot one you can't see underneath. That one I'm gonna have to really show you. The foot, the tape does not like to stick to. It's awful to get it to stick to the feet at all. However, for ankle stuff, it can be potentially useful. What's happening here is those two, the red and the blue pieces of tape, are going underneath the foot, and then the green piece of tape is then doing one of these over top of the anchors of the other two to help hold them down, okay? So that's my big trick with taping the foot, is we can put tape on the bottom of the foot, but where it ends, where its anchor is, another piece of tape that goes over top of that and comes up over can help keep that down. But taping the foot, although it can be helpful, it does not stay. You know, you can, so for temporary, it's fine, but it is what it is a little bit.
What about heel? I mean, same thing.
Heel, same thing. But you're better off doing that shoehorn idea. Like put the tape to cover it, because like for your classic plantar fasciitis, which is what that one's kind of designed for, is you want to go past the calcaneus and get the anchors kind of in the arch of the foot.
Yeah.
But then I'll put a piece of tape there, following the arch of the foot, and then coming up over either side malleoli. And so that's where like all of these little, I'm giving you all the landmarks. And you have to look them up, that's fine, but all the landmarks of like what you're trying to cover Just remember that that green piece of tape is going all the way onto the foot and coming up over on either side. But then the knee, although I said we could do 2 pieces instead of 1 for the red and the blue. You know, if you're covering something for knee related tendonitis, whether it be more maybe, it could be a Pezan-Serine attachment down here, but it could be that, or it could just be a medial knee. Anything, they have an old MCL, whatever, you might as well do that and the lateral. When you're doing those though, to try to looking up the anatomy, that Pezan-Serine common attachment where sartorius, gracilis, and semitendinosus all come together, might as well cover that along with tibial tuberosity. I think it'd be great for me to just have something over top of that. Same thing for the fibular head, because I just know where that's all the crap attaches. That's where the hamstrings attach, that's where the patellar ligament attaches. I might as well have tape covering that region. The thing about the patellar tendon is remembering how big it actually is. People will take the knee and they go right above the patella. They don't do that. The patellar tendon attachment is probably starts up here. And most people, when we get it in flexion, it's like that. So you want that tape to come up much higher than you anticipate when you're affecting patellar tendonitis. And most patellar tendonitis will occur down here. So, covers almost all your bases. There's a scar one there to show you that idea on the back of the hamstring. So the shoulder one, that green one, I would use 2 pieces. That one where people mess up is they don't make this tape come down low enough because we want to help deltoid out. Deltoid attachment is all the way down here. It's a much bigger muscle than people realize, even on a smaller person. Like, just because it doesn't have a lot of bulk to it doesn't mean that it doesn't cover a lot of space. So if I want to help deltoid, I gotta come down the arm, but this one at least. Come down like halfway down the upper arm, kind of a deal. But this is a general cheat sheet, and then just play with it and be adaptable beyond that. I try to cover as many bases and be like, I don't know, you got a shoulder something, that should help. You got a knee something, that should help, and on you go. The rest of the day is just gonna be me showing how to adapt when I have a person's body. So anybody that wants their ankle taped, that'll be the next one. There we go.